Now once you know the ATE ions, you can derive a lot of other ions from them using prefixes and suffixes. Let's see how that works. For example, if I've got nitrate, one thing you can do is take an oxygen off. And then you'll get now if you do that, that is called nitrite. The ITE ending on there means take away an oxygen. So let's try that again with another ion. Here we have chlorate from our list in the last video. If I take away an oxygen, I'm going to get ClO2 minus. So notice when I take away the oxygen, I leave the charge the same. What would I call this then? Ite. Now you'll see this. You'll see these a table of these prefixes and suffixes. They mean things like take away an oxygen is an ITE, and there are some other ones there. On the second sheet of the second page of the tip sheet that I have posted on the website. So you don't have to memorize these necessarily. If you know these, and if you know ITE means take away an oxygen, and you were to see this, you'd say that's chlorite. Now you can also, let's do an example of another prefix or suffix. Suppose you want to put on, add an oxygen, then you're going to get NO4 minus. That is called per-nitrate. Now we mentioned with peroxide that you put a per in front of something if it has an extra oxygen stuffed onto it. So you start with your nitrate, and if you put a per in front of the name, that stuffs an extra oxygen in there. Let's apply that to this one. You're going to get ClO4 minus. That's per chlorate. Per means you added an extra oxygen in there. Okay? So now we can, we can derive a lot of ITE ions from the 8 ions that we know. We can derive a lot of per ions from the 8 ions that we know. Now there's some others. Every possible combination isn't common. With the chlorate, though, you can derive quite a bit from it. So let's get rid of this one. Nitrite and pernitrate are really the only ones that you can see with the nitrate. But suppose here I added one, here I took away one. Suppose let's pick a different color. Suppose I take away 2. But I'm going to leave the charge the same. If I took 2 away, I'd have this. Now, they name this by putting a hypo in front of the chlorite. Hypochlorite. All right? Now, hypo is the prefix, and that means take away 2. You put a hypo in the beginning, and you have to have an ITE on the end to take away 2. Think of it like this. This takes away 1, and then this takes away 1 more. So that's hypochlorite that you have. So we have this family. Here's the head of the family. Here are 3 members of the family that we derived using prefixes and suffixes that you'll find on page 2. And there's another thing in the family too that you already know. If you have Cl, well, here, let's keep it all straight by contrasting the colors. There's Cl minus. That's chloride. It's got an IDE ending. You put an IDE ending in there usually when there's only one element in there. Usually. We've already seen when you have cyanide, there are a couple of elements in there. Certainly with IDE endings, there's often not oxygens, except when you have oxide. What this basically means is that you no longer have an oxyanion. All right, you've taken all the oxygens off. So you can try practicing this. Try practicing it with, for example, bromate and iodate. Try yourself to write down the entire family for these two, which are pretty much identical to what we have here. So those are some ways to derive many other ions from the head of the family, the 8 ion. Here's another thing you can do. You can use a thio prefix. That means swap a sulfur, an S, for an O. Okay, so here I have an ion off your polyatomic ion list. It's an 8 ion. You should know this one. So if you've learned your ion table, you can rattle off that it's cyanate. Now it's possible for you to take the O off and put an S there instead. And then you have thiocyanate. Okay? Let's do another one like that with thio. Suppose you have SO4 minus 2. This is on your polyatomic ion list. It's an 8 ion, ATE. It's sulfate. Here's the polyatomic ion list that I keep referring to. You saw it in the last video. There's sulfate. There's cyanate that we were just talking about. Okay, what if I want to write down the formula for thiosulfate? Well, I'm going to pull one of the oxygens off and put an S there instead. That would be thiosulfate. See? Okay, one last way to derive more ions from the head of the family. You can put a hydrogen ion onto negative ions. For example, if I have phosphate and I add a hydrogen to it, hydrogen ion to it, what's that going to do? Well, it's going to put a hydrogen out front. You put it out front, and it's going to decrease the charge by 1. Well, it's going to neutralize one of the negative charges, I should say. And now you have this ion. This is called hydrogen phosphate ion. What if I put another on there? What if I put 2 on there? Then I'm going to get something that looks like this. That's called dihydrogen phosphate. You can actually put a third one on there, but now you don't have a polyatomic ion anymore. If you put a third one on there, it's not an ion. It doesn't have a charge anymore. And we're going to see in a future video that this is called phosphoric acid. It's not an ion at all. So if you're trying to make other ions, you're going to add hydrogen ions on. Well, you still have some negative charge left over. Let's try this again with another ion. If I have a carbonate ion, and I add an H plus to it, I'm going to get this ion. What's my charge going to be? I have a -2 charge in the carbonate. If I add an H plus to this, it's going to take the negative charge down by 1. So I'll just have a -1 charge. And this is called hydrogen carbonate. And there's a space between the hydrogen and the carbonate there. This has a common name, which people use all the time, so you have to know it. You can name this either hydrogen carbonate is the systematic name, or bicarbonate. All right. So let's practice a little bit with this. Suppose I give you a compound, calcium thiosulfite, and I ask you to write down the formula for me. Okay, what you're going to have to do is, we have the name. The next thing I do is write down the 2 ions that I have here. Calcium ion is easy. Second column on the periodic table, everything there has a +2 charge. Thiosulfite, okay, well, I'm going to have to derive this from the ion that I do know. I know the ATE ions. I know that SO4 -2 is sulfate. So let's see, if I have sulfite, that has 1 less than that, right? Find another marker. Now I have an ITE ending on there, just like I'm trying to work towards. Now I have to put a thio on this. And the thio means that I am going to swap one of the O's for an S. That would be the ion that I'm looking for, the thiosulfite. So look here to recap. This is the one I know, so this is kind of the head of the family. I'm looking at the name here. What's different about the head of the family and this member? Well, it's got an ITE ending. That means take an oxygen off. So I did that. Now I have a sulfite. It's got a thio in front, and that means take one of the oxygens here and swap it off for a sulfur. So that's how I got thiosulfite. Now all I got to do is push them together. There's a +2 and a -2, so they go together nice. And the formula is going to be just that. That would be calcium thiosulfite. Let's do another one. let's see. Aluminum hypoiodite. All right. Okay, aluminum's easy. On the periodic table, it's in the +3 column, right? Remember we worked this out a couple of videos back. We worked out what the common charges are. There's aluminum, it's in the +3 column. That's where I'm getting that. Okay, so now this thing. I'm going to have to look on my polyatomic ion table at the 8 ions, and I'm going to look for something with iodine in it, and I see that I have this being iodate. So I know this one. Now this has got an ite and an ite on it, so that means take an oxygen off. That would be iodite. And then it's got a hypo in front, and that means take another oxygen off. Take an oxygen off of this. So this is going to be IO minus. It has one less oxygen than this one does. Okay, so now I have to put these together. This is a -1 and this is a +3. So I'm going to need 3 hypoiodite ions. That would be the formula then that I would work out. Okay. Now, just one more, then we'll quit. Let's name this one. Now, you got to watch out with these phosphates. There were a couple of hydrogen phosphates and a dihydrogen phosphate, which is what we have here. You use these in biology and medicine to make buffers that you grow tissue, you have tissue growing in or bacteria growing in. You make growth media out of these things. And they have to be at the right acidity. And if you pick the wrong compound, you'll get the wrong acidity. And you'll kill whatever it is that you're trying to grow. Both of these look the same, but they're not. They're very different as far as living things are concerned. They will have their solutions will have different acidities, and you won't make up a buffer with the right pH, the right acidity, if you choose the wrong one off the shelf. So let's name both of these. Okay, well, I gotta name the ions that are inside. Now, remember I said that when you don't know your ion table, you tend to break things up quite a bit more than they should be. I mean, someone who had never seen the polyatomic ion table might say, well, there's H plus ions in there, there's P minus 3 ions, and there's O minus 2 ions. You're breaking it up way too much. Really, this is just one big chunk. And you can keep yourself from breaking it up by saying, really, most of the time, what I'm going to do is peel the metal off, and then the rest of it is going to be the negative part. So the metal gives you the positive part, and the rest of it gives you the negative part. The metal is potassium, and it's in the first column, so you know that that's a K+. And now I need to figure out what the charge on all the rest of this is. And even if I didn't know, I could figure it out this way. The charge on the rest of it has got to be a -1 to balance off that one potassium that's there. So this must be the ion in there, and this must be its charge. So you can figure its charge out, even if you haven't memorized the table. You can still work it out. So this one, I see a phosphate in there. PO4 minus 3 is phosphate. And it looks like you've put 2 hydrogen ions on there to neutralize 2 of the negative charges. So this is going to be dihydrogen phosphate. So this is potassium ion. It's potassium dihydrogen phosphate. That's what that one is. How about this one? With the ions in there. there are potassium ions. Now notice there's two of them, but I don't care how many there are when I'm naming it. I am just looking at what kind of ions I've got here. Okay? So I've got K plus ions there. There's two of them there. And the rest of it is the negative ion. And what's the charge on that got to be? Well, there are two K pluses here, so this has to have a -2 charge for this to work. So I'm going to call this is a potassium ion, and this is a hydrogen phosphate ion. Hydrogen phosphate. All right, so practice those. There are a fair number of these on the homework that I'll be putting up.